Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. Jack leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, glaring at the Martian parrot perched on the counter. Its vibrant red feathers puffed up as it tilted its head, staring back at him. Jack had never trusted that bird, not even when he first got it from a shady dealer on Ganymede Station. "You know why humans can't live on Mars?" the parrot squawked, breaking the silence. Jack sighed. "Why?" "Because there's no atmosphere. Get it? No air." The parrot let out a screech that sounded disturbingly like laughter, its wings flapping excitedly. The joke was so bad that Jack could barely muster an eye roll. He rubbed his temples, leaning forward to put his face in his hands. Running the alien pet emporium wasn't the dream job he had imagined when he signed the lease. Sure, the idea of selling exotic pets from across the galaxy had seemed exciting at first until he realized exactly what kind of creatures he'd have to deal with. It wasn't just the animals either. The alien customers were somehow worse. The bell above the door jingled, and Jack immediately sat up straighter. The morning rush had been chaotic enough, and he wasn't sure he had the energy for another interaction. As soon as he saw the customer, he groaned inwardly. A Saturnian, tall and humanoid with 4 arms and a face that resembled a particularly angry squid, stepped into the shop. The alien's robes flowed behind it, giving off an air of self-importance that made Jack's stomach churn. "Greetings," the Saturnian said in a clipped, formal tone. "I require a pet." Jack forced a smile. "You've come to the right place." The Saturnian's eyes as there were 6 of them shifted suspiciously around the shop, landing briefly on the disappearing Jupiter cat, which was lounging lazily on a shelf. As soon as the Saturnian's gaze landed on it, the cat vanished with a flick of its sleek tail. Jack groaned again. "What kind of pet are you looking for?" Jack asked, trying to keep the conversation moving. "I require a pet that is obedient, efficient, and follows orders precisely. No surprises." The Saturnian's voice was like nails on a chalkboard, grating and humorless. Jack bit his lip. "Well, let's see." He glanced around the shop, eyes flicking to the dog sitting beside the counter. The dog, a sleek metal contraption with soft artificial fur, was wagging its tail enthusiastically. It had been rebooted that morning, and so far, it hadn't glitched. "Maybe today would be different." "How about this dog?" Jack said, gesturing to the robotic animal. "It's well trained and follows commands perfectly." The Saturnian eyed the dog with suspicion, but nodded slowly. "Demonstrate." Jack swallowed nervously and snapped his fingers. "Sit," he commanded. The dog immediately sat down, its tail still wagging. "Good boy," Jack muttered under his breath. "Now, stay." The dog froze, its tail halting mid-wag. Jack let out a breath of relief. "So far, so good." "And now, roll over," Jack said. The dog paused for a moment, then rolled over onto its back, mechanical paws in the air. The Saturnian nodded approvingly, its 6 eyes focused intently on the dog. "Excellent," the alien said. "I will take it." Before Jack could celebrate his small victory, the dog suddenly began twitching. Its tail, stuck in wag mode, started flailing uncontrollably, hitting the shelves behind it. Jack watched in horror as the dog glitched out, its eyes blinking rapidly. "Alert, unauthorized command detected." The dog barked in a robotic voice. "Defense mode engaged." "Oh no," Jack whispered. The dog sprang to its feet, barking wildly and racing toward the Saturnian, who recoiled in shock. "No, bad dog." "Stay," Jack shouted, but it was too late. The dog had launched itself at the Saturnian's robes, tugging at them with its mechanical teeth. The Saturnian screeched, flailing its arms in an attempt to shake the dog loose. "Defense mode, defense mode." The dog continued to bark as it latched onto the Saturnian's robes. Jack ran over, desperately pulling the dog off. "I'm so sorry." "I'll just let me just he fumbled with the reboot button on the dog's side, pressing it as hard as he could. The dog froze mid-bark and powered down, collapsing onto the floor. The Saturnian glared at Jack, adjusting its tattered robes. "This is unacceptable," it hissed. "I'll give you a discount," Jack offered weakly, holding up the lifeless eye dog. The Saturnian made a sound that could only be described as an angry squid gargle before storming out of the shop, its multiple arms swishing its robes furiously behind it. Jack dropped the eye dog onto the counter with a heavy sigh. "Of course that happened," he muttered. "Why wouldn't it?" Before he could recover, the door jangled again. This time, Jack barely had time to react before a telepathic Venusian floated into the store, its gaseous body shimmering in the dim light. Venusians didn't speak with words, they communicated through thoughts, which often led to awkward, one-sided conversations. "I require assistance," the Venusian's voice echoed directly in Jack's head, making him wince. Jack plastered on another forced smile. "How can I help?" The Venusian floated lazily toward the Martian parrots, its transparent body pulsing slightly. "What is this creature?" "Oh, those are Martian parrots. They're really talkative." The Venusian hovered in front of the parrots, inspecting them closely. Jack could already feel the tension in the air. He wasn't sure why, but Martian parrots and Venusians never seem to mix well. "This one seems peculiar," the Venusian thought. "Does it speak?" Jack nodded. "Yeah, they can talk." "Pretty funny too." The parrot blinked its beady eyes at the Venusian. "Hey, you know why Venusians are always floating around? Because they've got no solid ideas." "Ha, get it? Solid?" The parrot burst into laughter. Jack cringed, bracing himself for the inevitable. The Venusian's shimmering form dimmed slightly, its thoughts growing sharper. "Insult detected. This creature is offensive." Jack immediately held up his hands. "I'm sorry, they're not supposed to say stuff like that. It's just they're programmed with bad jokes." The Venusian gave one final pulse of annoyance before floating toward the door. "Unacceptable service." As the Venusian exited, Jack let out another long sigh. It had only been 2 hours since the store opened, and he was already ready to close up shop for good. He plopped down in his chair behind the counter, rubbing his face with his hands. "Why did I ever think this was a good idea?" he muttered. The Jupiter cat reappeared on the shelf, yawning lazily as if mocking him. Jack shot the cat a dirty look but said nothing. If it wanted to vanish again, that was just fine with him. Jack sat behind the counter, staring at the eye dog, still lifeless on the floor after its latest malfunction. He was seriously considering shutting the whole shop down for the day. The thought of more customers and the chaos that came with them was making his head throb. He'd spent half his morning apologizing to aliens who didn't understand sarcasm, humor, or why some pets just couldn't follow orders perfectly. Just as he was about to shut the store down early, the bell above the door jangled once again. He sighed heavily and dragged himself out of his chair to see who it was this time. The customer who entered was unlike any he'd dealt with at Diazara, a regular. She wasn't like most of his alien clientele. She kept to herself, rarely said more than a few words, and always picked the strangest pets. Zara was from a species Jack couldn't quite place. She had humanoid features but moved with an ethereal grace that made her seem like she was gliding rather than walking. Her eyes, a soft shade of green, flicked around the store, surveying the chaos left behind by his earlier customers. "Rough morning?" Zara asked, her voice calm and soothing. "You have no idea," Jack replied, slumping onto the counter. The eye dog glitched out again. The Martian parrots offended another telepathic customer, and I've had a Jupiter cat vanish in the middle of a sale. Zara glanced down at the powered-off eye dog, then at the Martian parrots, which were still squawking away on the other side of the room, laughing at their own jokes. "Sounds like quite the handful." "You're telling me," Jack muttered. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. It's like the store is cursed. Every time I think things are under control, something else blows up literally." In the case of the eye dog, Zara chuckled softly, her eyes softening as she looked around the shop. "You're dealing with creatures from dozens of different worlds, each with their own quirks. You can't expect them to behave like Earth pets. Jack knew she was right, but it didn't make his job any easier. He'd gotten into the business thinking it would be exciting, fun even. He hadn't expected it to feel like babysitting hyperactive toddlers from across the galaxy. Zara wandered over to the quantum hamster, who was blinking in and out of existence inside its enclosure. "This one's new," she remarked, her fingers lightly tapping the glass. "You're branching out," Jack grunted. "Yeah, got a new shipment this morning." "It's been interesting." The hamster blinked out of sight again, and Zara gave a small smile. "You know, Jack, maybe you're approaching this the wrong way." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Zara turned to face him fully, her green eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. "You're trying to run this place like a normal pet store. But these aren't normal pets. You can't control them the way you would with animals from Earth. You've got to meet them on their level." Jack frowned. "And how exactly do I do that?" Zara's smile widened. "Watch." She approached the plasma ferret, a hyperactive ball of energy that had been phasing through walls and causing all sorts of trouble earlier. As Jack watched, Zara extended her hand toward the ferret. The little creature darted back and forth for a moment, its body glowing with a soft blue light, before suddenly calming. It approached Zara cautiously, sniffing her fingers before phasing through her hand and reappearing on her shoulder, perfectly calm. Jack blinked. "How did you do that?" Zara gave him a knowing look. "I didn't try to control it. I let it be what it is. Once it saw I wasn't going to try and force it to behave, it relaxed." Jack stared at her, dumbfounded. "You mean all this time, I've been trying too hard?" Zara nodded. "These animals are alien to you. They don't respond to control the way you're used to. You've got to embrace the chaos a little. Let them come to you on their own terms." Jack leaned back against the counter, processing her words. Maybe she had a point. Every day felt like a battle because he was trying to make the pets behave in ways that just weren't natural for them. If he changed his approach, maybe things would be less of a nightmare. Zara gently scratched the plasma ferret's head before placing it back in its enclosure. "You'll figure it out, Jack. You've just got to think outside the box." Jack let out a long breath. "Thanks, Zara. I guess I needed to hear that." She smiled again, turning toward the door. "Anytime. I'll be back for a new pet soon. Try not to let the store implode before then." Jack laughed, watching as Zara left the shop. For the first time all day, he felt like he could breathe a little easier. He looked around at the chaos in the staria, the overturned shelves, the eye dog still lifeless on the floor, the Martian parrots squawking in the background, and decided it was time to change things up. If Zara could manage these crazy creatures without breaking a sweat, then so could he. Jack spent the next few hours cleaning up, rebooting the eye dog, and reorganizing the enclosures. Instead of getting frustrated when the Jupiter cats disappeared or the quantum hamster blinked out of existence, he let it go. He focused on creating a more relaxed environment, one where the pets and the customers could feel comfortable. By late afternoon, the store was starting to feel like a more manageable place. Jack even managed to sell a Martian parrot to an alien who had a surprisingly good sense of humor. As the day wore on, Jack found himself smiling more. The chaos hadn't disappeared, but it didn't seem as overwhelming. He was starting to see his shop in a new light. Sure, it was wild, unpredictable, and filled with some of the strangest creatures in the galaxy, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. As Jack was locking up for the night, he glanced over at the eye dog, who was sitting obediently by the door. "You know what, buddy? I think we might actually survive this." The eye dog's tail wagged in response, its reboot complete and functioning at least for now. The next morning, Jack woke up feeling more optimistic. He opened the shop early, making sure everything was in order before the first customers arrived. When the door jangled open, he greeted the alien family with a genuine smile instead of his usual forced cheerfulness. The day progressed with its usual ups and downs, but Jack found himself handling the chaos much better. The Jupiter cats still vanished at the worst possible moments, the Martian parrots told their terrible jokes, and the quantum hamster blinked in and out of existence. But Jack no longer saw these things as problems, just part of the charm of running an alien pet shop. By midday, the store was bustling with customers. A group of young aliens from a nearby planet were crowding around the plasma ferrets, fascinated by their ability to phase through walls. The iDog was dutifully following Jack around, its glitches apparently fixed for the time being. As Jack rang up a sale for a Neptunian jellyfish, he realized that Zara had been right all along. The key wasn't to control the pets, it was to understand them, to let them be what they were and roll with the punches. The bell above the door jingled once again, and Jack looked up to see Zara standing in the doorway, her usual calm expression on her face. "Still in one piece, I see," she said, her eyes twinkling. Jack grinned. "Barely, but yeah." "You were right, Zara. I've been going about this all wrong." Zara stepped inside, glancing around at the bustling shop. "Looks like you're getting the hang of it." Jack nodded. "I think I am. It's still chaos, but maybe I like it that way." Zara smiled, giving him a small nod of approval. "Good. Because something tells me this place will never be boring." Jack laughed. "I think I can live with that." As Zara wandered off to browse the new arrivals, Jack leaned back against the counter, taking in the scene. His shop was chaotic, unpredictable, and filled with the strangest creatures in the galaxy, but it was his chaos. And for the first time, Jack realized that maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have it any other way.